In the arid heart of the Caatinga, where the sun scorched the dry earth and twisted trees seemed to fight against time, there was a village forgotten by the world. Mud and wooden houses stood in disorder, surrounded by sparse vegetation barely resisting the relentless heat. The hot wind blew, carrying the scent of dust and dry leaves, while crickets and owls composed the soundtrack of the silent night. Zé had lived there forever, alongside his grandmother, Dona Maria, a woman with gray hair and deep eyes, who knew the Sertão stories like few others. He was sitting on the doorstep, watching the sky painted red by the sunset, when his grandmother began to speak, her hoarse voice filled with respect and fear. She told him about the Saci, that one-legged being who hopped through the woods with his red cap and played tricks. But according to her, he was not just a prankster. The Saci was the guardian of the Caatinga, long asleep, awakened only when nature was disrespected. Zé, Dona Maria said, the Caatinga has eyes, has ears, and the Saci is always nearby, guarding what is his. But he only shows himself when he senses a threat. The young boy listened closely, the image of the little red man dancing in the forest burning in his mind. Life in the village was hard. The drought punished, and the lack of water made every drop precious. The inhabitants lived in a mixture of faith and fear, respecting the traditions passed down by their ancestors. Zé knew that there, in that forgotten place, there were secrets only the old ones understood. When night fell, bringing a heavy silence, Zé felt the weight of that warning. Something in the Caatinga was about to change, and he didn't know if he was ready to face what was coming. In the nights that followed, the village seemed to plunge into an even denser silence, as if the Caatinga itself held its breath. Zé began to notice small, strange things. Objects disappeared from doors, tools vanished from barns, and single-footed footprints appeared on his grandmother's floor, small and deep, disappearing into the dust without a trace. One night, while the moon timidly peeked through the clouds, he heard a strange whisper coming from the backyard. It was a sharp sound, almost a muffled laugh, that made him shiver from head to toe. Trembling, he ran inside, locking the door behind him. His grandmother, who was not sleeping, just looked at him with tired eyes and said, "The Saci is waking up, boy. It's not a good thing." In the central square, the villagers began exchanging suspicious glances. Old Dona Celia whispered to her neighbors that the Saci's mischiefs were returning, but they had never seen anything so frightening. Others tried to downplay it, saying it was just imagination, but fear was in the air, growing silently. Zé talked to his friends, who had also heard strange noises and seen quick shadows. No one could explain it, and the feeling that something was watching them grew every night. The oldest in the village recalled old stories, but this time the tone was different. There was a real fear, a premonition. That same night, while the wind blew strongly and made dust dance through the empty streets, Zé looked at the Caatinga and felt, for the first time, a deep fear. Something had awakened there, and it was not just a legend. The next morning, the village square filled with restless murmurs. The inhabitants, still shaken by what they felt in the previous nights, gathered around the old dry tree that dominated the center. There, the elders began telling stories that seemed to whisper from the very earth. Dona Celia, with her trembling voice, spoke of times when the Saci was not just a mischievous spirit, but an entity that exacted a heavy price from those who disrespected the Caatinga. She told of people who disappeared without a trace, dead animals, and of the sudden whirlwind that appeared to scare and punish. The young listened with wide eyes, torn between fascination and fear. Zé shivered when he heard about the episode, when a man from the village tried to hunt the Saci, and since then no one knew about him. It was as if the Sertão itself guarded impenetrable secrets, where the supernatural and the real mingled. Despite the prayers and charms some villagers prepared to ward off evil, the tension grew. The lights in the houses seemed less welcoming, and even the animals behaved strangely. For Zé, the creature he knew from the stories had changed. It was no longer the simple mischievous Saci, but something darker, a vengeful force that demanded respect and caution. At dusk, as the sky turned orange, Zé felt an urgent need to understand decided that night he would not stay home. He needed to see with his own eyes what was hiding in the shadows of the Caatinga. When night fell, turning the sky a deep black, Zay gathered his friends Tiago and Maria. Armed with flashlights and uncertain courage, they entered the Caatinga, where silence was broken only by the rustling of dry leaves and the distant sounds of nocturnal animals. The air was heavy, charged with an unsettling energy that seemed to vibrate on every twisted branch. As they walked, the wind began to blow stronger, lifting dust whirlwinds spinning in small tornadoes over the cracked ground. The shadows of the trees created strange shapes that seemed to move with them, as if the forest itself watched them with invisible eyes. Zay felt his heart race with every step, a mix of fear and fascination. They found unusual footprints, with only one step in each print, as if something jumped from place to place, disappearing right after. Tiago tried to follow the tracks, but they suddenly vanished, as if the ground swallowed them. Maria, who knew some old prayers, murmured words to calm the environment, but not even her voice seemed to have an effect. Suddenly, a short and muffled laugh echoed between the trees, making the three freeze in place. It was a mischievous laugh, but filled with malice, seeming to come from all directions at once. They exchanged frightened glances, knowing they were too close to whatever was there. The trio decided to turn back, heavy fear on their shoulders. On the way, the wind seemed to whisper ancient secrets, and Zay felt that the Caatinga he knew was alive, full of mysteries and dangers far beyond what the stories told. That same night, the wind howled fiercely through the village, carrying a feeling of unease. Suddenly the whirlwind appeared, spinning rapidly near the houses, lifting dust and dry leaves, announcing the arrival of the Saci. The creature, once just a mischievous legend, now showed its dark and vengeful face. Zay was awake, looking through the window when he saw the small red figure leap among the shadows, its single leg moving with frightening speed. The sharp, piercing laugh echoed, making the young man's heart race. Suddenly, his grandmother's lamp went out by itself, plunging the room into heavy darkness. The next morning, the village woke in panic. So João, the cowboy, had disappeared during the night, leaving only solitary footprints near the dry creek. Other reports surfaced: injured animals, destroyed objects, and a growing climate of terror. Some villagers began packing their few belongings, determined to flee. But Zay knew fleeing would not solve anything. He felt the Saci was seeking something, an ancient debt, a forgotten vengeance that needed to be settled for peace to return to the Caatinga. With Dona Maria's help, he began searching for clues among old stories, determined to understand and face the awakened force. The village was on the brink of collapse, and the young man felt the weight of responsibility grow on his shoulders. The Saci was no longer just a myth. It was a real threat, and its wrath could consume everything if not stopped. In the shadow of the forest, Zay followed footprints that seemed to pulse with strange energy. The whirlwind spun before him as the Saci appeared among the trees, his red cap shining like a flame. The creature was no longer the simple trickster of stories. His eyes shone with an ancient, deep fury. Zay remembered his grandmother's words, who had taught a ritual to appease the spirits of the Caatinga: to draw a circle on the ground with earth from the forest itself, light a fire with dry branches, and recite ancient verses of respect and forgiveness. With trembling hands, he began the ritual, feeling the weight of each word. The Saci advanced, spinning in his whirlwind, provoking winds that almost knocked down the surrounding trees. But upon hearing Zay's words, his fury seemed to lessen, and an ancient sadness shone in his eyes. The young man realized the being sought justice, revenge for a wound done to nature that had never healed. At that moment, Zay understood. The Saci was not just a guardian, but a reflection of the broken balance between man and the Caatinga. Sacrifice and respect needed to be restored for peace to reign again. The whirlwind slowly dissipated, and the Saci disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a reverent silence. Zay felt the forest air lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. But he knew that balance was fragile, and respect must always be maintained. The village returned to its rhythm, but something had changed. The air seemed lighter, and the silence of the Caatinga carried renewed respect. Zay, now more aware of the value of that dry land and the stories surrounding it, knew the Saci could awaken again if the balance was broken. Donna Maria smiled proudly, seeing in her grandson the hope of a new generation that would understand the power and importance of tradition and nature. The Caatinga remained alive, guarding its secrets and its invisible guardian. On windy nights, when the whirlwind passed quickly through the village, the inhabitants remembered. There, among the twisted trees and cracked earth, the supernatural was never far away. And the Saci, silent and watchful, continued to guard, waiting.